Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with the first video in a new series I'm going to be doing on the channel, and this is going to be the first of the Shadow of Kyoshi chapter analysis discussion videos. So this one is going to be for the very first chapter in the book, which is the prologue. So as I go forward through this series, we're obviously going to do a video for every single chapter right up to the very end of the book, and my plan is to get through the chapters relatively quickly. This is not going to be a series that you're going to be waiting months and months to get to the end of. My plan is to do, especially in the early days, put out multiple discussion videos, so multiple chapter analysis a day, and get through it within maybe 3 or so weeks, because again, this book is shorter than the first book, so there's less chapters, so it'll be easier to get through it. There's not as many videos to do, so once you guys read the book, you won't be left waiting months to hear my thoughts on the final chapters. I'll get to that quickly because these videos are important for myself and kind of getting my own understanding of the book through and analyzing the chapters so in detail. So I want that for myself just as quickly as you guys probably want the discussion. The other thing is just regard to, I suppose, how I'm going to do sort of spoilers over the course of this. And what I mean by that is, of course, I've read the book already. You've seen other videos with my just review of the book. Is that when I'm discussing, say, chapter 1, that I'm not suddenly going to bring in stuff from, say, chapter 12 and start talking about chapter 12 just because one sort of links into 12. The approach I'm more going to have is that, I'll mention that there is a chapter later on that touches on this topic more, but we'll discuss that more when we get to it. So it's more of just acknowledging that this chapter will be explored more later, and I'll maybe bring in a few smaller facts from later chapters into this, just to help stuff maybe that needs a little bit more context. So that way, for people who've read the book already, there's no problem. You just get all the analysis that you want. But for people who maybe want to do it in a way where they're reading the book for the first time, they read a chapter, watch a video, read a chapter, watch an analysis video, they're not getting spoiled on the full extent of the later half of the book. Because I did see with the Rise of Kyoshi chapter analysis videos that some people did mention that they actually watch the videos along with their first read-through of the book. So that was quite interesting. So that's what we're going to do. So yeah, like I said, we're starting off here with the first chapter of the book, which is Prologue. And this is set in the past. It's a flashback to what happened to Yun immediately after he was taken by Father Glowworm. So this is, I think, at the end of the chapter called The Spirit from the first book. And we immediately catch up with Yun and where he was taken. At the time, of course, we thought this was Yun being taken to basically be devoured by Father Glowworm, killed by him. All the characters felt that that was what happened, right up until he made his shocking appearance at the end of Rise of Kyoshi to kill Jianzhu. So here we immediately get the idea that Father Glowworm, through bringing him back into the cave that they went to meet him in, has actually brought Yun into the spirit world. So that's where this whole chapter takes place. It's Yun in the spirit world with Father Glowworm, dealing with the aftermath of the betrayal of Jianzhu, realizing that he's not the Avatar and Kyoshi is, and just how he deals with his identity now, that he has survived whatever was happening, but now he has Glowworm right there in the spirit world to deal with. How does he suddenly get himself back up and going and get himself out of this? How does he survive after his identity has just been shattered and he needs himself to be back together to handle Glowworm? That's what this chapter is about. So we immediately see that Yun is in a pretty bad state, because of course he was poisoned as well, just prior to this, so that Jianzhu could force him to actually go before Glowworm to get the blood test to see who is the Avatar. But he's pretty much recovered from that now. But the point is that Yun is really struggling with what has happened. It says here, he wasn't. End of sentence. He was nothing. He is in such an emotional state right now that he just considers himself to be nothing. He starts to smash his head against the ground here. It says here, Yoon dashed his head against the ground in a frenzied corruption of a spirit, or of a student bowing to their master. Jianzhu. His entire mind was a screamed name, a single screeching tone on a broken flute. His skull thudded against the brackish mud. Jianzhu. And he's so emotional, and he's in the spirit world, that he's affecting the spirit world around him. And so Father Glowworm is actually like staying way away from Yoon as he's going through such an emotional sort of outburst here, because I suppose it is dangerous for spirits to be around super emotional and powerful humans, especially because, of course, Yoon is in the spirit world with his body, so he can actually do his bending, even though he doesn't realize that yet. And this is the core point of, I suppose, highlighting that Yoon, as we go through the book, it's not all about that he's been corrupted by Father Glowworm. That most of this is himself, his own views on this, and how this betrayal by Jianzhu, finding out that he's not the Avatar, he deals with this. How does he deal with this crazy situation? And this is what happens. He wants the pain to stop. Yoon wanted it to stop. He wanted the anguish to end. It hurt so much to see everything he'd worked for shredded to sparks and dust. It was destroying him from the inside. So let it out. The whisper came to him in his own voice. Not the eyes, not Jianzhu's. Put the pain outside. Put it somewhere else. On someone else. So this is that sense of how he's directing his anger about what's happened is now that he'll take the pain from within himself and apply it to others. Revenge, basically. And Jianzhu is the one at the top of that list who he wants revenge against. And we of course know that he gets it, but this is that transition point for him as a character of seeing his world shattered apart and how he gets himself back up and going again. But there's still Glowworm to deal with, of course. Like we see that like he's so emotional that he starts to sort of like break the environment around him in this section of the spirit world that he's in. And it's only at this point that he breaks the environment that he realizes that like, oh, I am in the spirit world. What am I meant to do here? Because he's never heard about like a human being in the spirit world with their body. That's completely different than Kelsong's experience being in the spirit world and so on. They even mention it here. The realm of the spirits was a mirror held up to its visitors, a reflection of your emotions, a reality that shaped around your spirit's intangible projection. So some very interesting stuff. But then Glowworm comes into the chapter in a proper way. So he's obviously, once he realizes he's in the spirit world with Glowworm, suddenly the anger sort of goes away and he's suddenly afraid, like, how do I get out of this situation? And the only thing he can think to say is like, okay, who's the spirit? I have to say something. Father Glowworm? Like, he just says his name. And this is so interesting what they do here, because this does come up later on. They sort of explain it a little bit more, but also here. He'd made a mistake. A crucial, invisible barrier had been broken by saying the name aloud, and now he was more connected and vulnerable to it than ever. Glowworm says, I call myself that. Now, child, I believe you owe me your name, and Yoon says it. They get across this idea that, like, spirits who have a name that they acknowledge as being their own, and not just one that, like, a human came up for them with, there's a power to that name, because I suppose most spirits don't actually have one. So a powerful spirit and being named, it creates a connection to a degree. And so now Yoon is more vulnerable to Glowworm just because they've said their names to each other, which is a kind of interesting dynamic here. So we see, like, it says here, like, his poise was failing him. This is not the confident Yoon from before. And it even says it here. Maybe Avatar Yoon had the confidence to talk his way out of this, but no such person existed anymore. He immediately just considers the person that he was as the Avatar is just completely gone. He has to find a way to make himself someone who can talk his way out of this. So he reverts to the only person that he's ever been before, and that is this swindler Yoon, the boy from Makapu, who was always sort of scamming people at Pai Sho because he was skilled, but also was able to organize it in a really good way. And he's like, everything is a game. I'll try and draw this one out as far as I can. I will survive a turn longer. So he begins to sort of talk in terms of like everything is a game. When in doubt, flatter the mark. So he begins to, really talk in great terms about Glowworm, like, I can hardly be faulted for wanting to ask questions of a spirit wiser than the best of humanity. And he points out that, the sages took like 16 years to find the Avatar, or like didn't find the Avatar in 16 years. You immediately knew who the Avatar was. That is the truth about you, that you are better than them. And Glowworm says, you don't fight the kind of battle Karuk and I did and not be able to recognize your opponent's spirit. I could already feel Jianzhu bringing his reincarnation closer to one of my tunnels. It had to be one of you children. So immediately it's brought up again. Glowworm fought Karuk in the past. That is going to be a very important plot point later on in the book when we get Karuk's backstory. So that's an important one to remember, that it was set up before that they fought, and so they fought so closely that Glowworm will forever remember the spirit of the Avatar. That's how he was in the first place able to identify Kyoshi, by her blood basically, because he's tasted that blood before through Karuk. So that's a very interesting point given what's, I suppose, going to happen. So he's trying to flatter Glowworm to get an extra turn basically. And so Yuna's like, wait, tunnels? You have routes to the human world? More than one? And this is a very interesting point of like, this is sort of the special ability as a spirit that Glowworm has. And this comes up later on as like, it's confirmed it's something special to him, that he can actually make like lasting kind of small scale portals between the worlds by himself. He says, yes, I can create passages to the human realm. And he's like, no, you won't trick me into sending you back. You're not the bridge between the humans and spirits, boy. He basically just says you're worthless. The impurity in the ore, I've tasted your blood and you're nothing. You're not even worth this conversation. And he's like, I can tell how upset you are by the truth. Don't be. Who needs avatarhood? You will find your own use and your own immortality once I strengthen myself on your blood. Part of your essence will exist within me forever. And Glowworm goes to sort of, I suppose, devour Yun properly, I suppose, in the spirit world here. And says, now be grateful, for we are about to become one. So this is the setup at the end of the prologue, because that's where it ends, with the idea that you think the Yun that we encounter at the end of Rise of Kyoshi is this Glowworm and Yun combination type thing. Like he just says here, they're about to become one. So Yun's actions are informed by Glowworm. But there are interlude chapters that are going to take place over the course of the book that will give extra context to this, that will follow directly this up and reveal a very different sort of turn of events that happens here. It doesn't go the way you think it does, and that's very, very interesting. But the significant point here is obviously the idea Glowworm can create tunnels. To me, that's a very interesting point because we have early spirits like Heibai and Wan Shi Tong, who are revealed to be spirits capable of bringing people and I suppose transferring between the worlds at will, which, given what we know now about spirits, seems like a crazy sort of overpowered ability because it's a plot point within the franchise that the spirit portals were closed since Wan's era, and most spirits shouldn't be able to cross over. So, okay, here is a spirit that they're pointing at specifically has the ability to create small passages, permanent small passages, because they basically reveal here that the mountain cave that they found Glowworm in, the cave is actually a passageway into the spirit world, which I think is a very cool idea, because like we know of like Vatu was the one who created the northern and the southern spirit portal, because he reveals in Beginnings that he was the one who in the first place broke through the divide that separated the two worlds. And then we also, like I said, have characters like Heibai, who when you look back on those episodes with what we know now, it feels weird that this seemingly random spirit of a forest does have the ability to just like bring humans into the spirit world. Because again, Sokka was in the spirit world. That's what that episode says to us, as well as a lot of people from that town. Similarly with Wan Shi Tong, he has the ability himself to activate an ability that transfers himself, everyone in it, the whole spirit library, back into the spirit world. Obviously, Wan Shi Tong is a powerful spirit. I suppose Heibai is retroactively, I suppose, revealed to also be an exceptionally powerful spirit to have that ability. But I suppose it is different than Glowworm's ability here, which is that he can just create sort of permanent tunnels, and he has multiple of them, and they just exist. Versus Heibai, who can sort of, I suppose, touch people and transfer them to the spirit world, or Wan Shi Tong, who can transfer himself and a building. He doesn't create like a permanent sort of rift that always remains open. He just transfers himself and his things back. So I like that, how it adds extra nuance, extra detail to the idea of spirits, and that it gets across that Glowworm, just with that ability, is an extraordinarily threatening spirit. But he was afraid of Yoon in the spirit world when Yoon was emotional, and made sure to sort of calm him down. And I suppose this gets into the idea of like him just being a little bit sort of on guard. He knows humans who are benders, especially powerful benders, can threaten him because he had a fight with Karuk, and obviously neither of them sort of defeated each other fully. So it suggests, that he knows, he has that experience with humans and knows to be cautious with certain ones, but obviously is confident that he can become one with Yoon, as he says here. Like, I will strengthen myself on your blood. That's an interesting one, because this is probably the other dynamic here of like, we know like spirit possession is that like a spirit goes through someone's body and leaves behind sort of like an opening of their mind, changes their physical appearance to a degree, makes them more powerful. Tokuga from the comics is an example of that. Yao from Wan's era is an example of that, kind of in reverse, where it seemingly made him weaker. And the Avatar itself, like Wan before the permanent fusing, is an example of a human being empowered by a spirit just sort of passing through them. That is not what Glowworm is trying to do here. He is trying to consume him completely, to the point where, like, I suppose Yun's soul will strengthen and enhance his own. So is this suggesting this idea of like, if a spirit consumes a human, they become more powerful? Because Glowworm was always about the teeth and like taking blood, and now it's revealed that he takes humans as well. That's an interesting idea, just the idea of him devouring people, and that's what he wants to do to Yoon. But what is Yoon going to do? He's angry, upset, he feels like he's nothing, but he has managed to sort of turn on some sort of a personality within himself. Back to the old, Pai Sho player that he was, swindler on the streets. Is that going to be enough to make him be able to maybe fight back? We'll see when we get to the next interlude, I suppose. But that's been it for the prologue chapter discussion. Next we'll go into the official, I suppose, first proper chapter. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this opening chapter of the book. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.